any method of calculating national income is, second thing we will be now talking about is steps involved. So here, steps involved in the measurement of national income through expenditure method. So steps are almost alike. Steps are almost alike, what we have been talking about. The first and foremost step is to identify the economic unit. Again, that identification part. Okay? To identify the identification of economic unit. So identification of economic unit means you will have to understand that which economic unit is incurring this final expenditure. Okay? Or incurring, let me write it for you people, final expenditure. That means which part of the economy is making this final expenditure. Okay, for example, you can say households or consuming. Okay, consumer sector, consuming sector, firm or producing sector. Okay, and obviously government sector. So three sectors we have: household, firm and government. This is the identification part. First. Second, you have to make a classification of final aggregate expenditure. We have to classification of final aggregate. Aggregate means this plus this plus this. Aggregate expenditure. Fine. So classification means when we classify it, we break it down into different parts. That's what I was talking about in technical terms. Now I will say it in the elaborative form. Private final consumption expenditure, it will be classified into private final consumption expenditure, or you can write it like private final consumption expenditure. Okay. Second will be government final consumption expenditure. Okay. Third will be our gross fixed capital formation. It is gross fixed capital formation. And next we can talk about is that delta S is change in stocks, and fifth, net exports. Okay, this is how we classify it into different parts. After you have classified it, now we will sum up all these very 5 components. When we sum up all these very 5 components, we will get our GDP at the sum of all these 5 will be equal to our GDP at MP. There is an alternative classification which I just a few minutes back demonstrated for you people. That is, your GDP at MP is private consumption expenditure. Okay, your investment expenditure, your government purchases of goods and services, that is government expenditure, government purchase of goods and services, your net exports. Some of these components is also equal to GDP. Where we wrote it? We wrote it like Y is equal to GDP is equal to C plus I plus G X minus M. I have already explained this part how it is. It is an alternative. It is an alternative for classification. It may be asked in this way or that way. Got it? Then what we can do, our third step is measurement of final expenditure on these above components, these components. Okay, so this will be our third step, measurement of final expenditure on the alright, above components. Now you know what are the above components. Okay, sum total of all these will be equal to GDP at MP. By deducting GDP at MP with depreciation and NIT, from we will get NDP at FC. This is also one of the steps. It has to be taken. You can add it as fourth step by deducting depreciation, and this you will get what? NDP at FC. That means to reach at NDP at FC. And final, you can say estimation of net factor income from abroad. So we can do one thing, we can take it as fourth point, and this could be taken as the fifth point, but doesn't matter for us people. Now we know what we are talking about. We will have to estimation of net factor income from abroad, NFIA, in order to reach to the domestic part of our income. That is our ultimate aim, is to reach at NDP at FC. That is what we are striving or thriving for. So when we are done with our methods, my dear students, now what remains? Exactly, after doing methods, let us take precautions. So under precautions, this is the same old game. Keep that second hand good part in your mind. You will be done with the precautions. Rest is same. Precautions to be taken while estimating national income by expenditure method. Number first, to avoid double counting. If you have not understood it, refer to my previous lecture where I am teaching the first method of calculation. I have elaborated it in a very detailed manner with an example. Number second, government expenditure. It is a precaution. Government expenditure on all transfer payments. That is why it becomes a precaution. Otherwise, we have to take government expenditure into consideration in order to calculate our national income. But government expenditure on all transfer payments. Transfer payment means that subsidies, scholarships, your unemployment allowances, old age pension, etc., etc., is to be excluded. Is excluded. Sorry. Is excluded. Okay, it's actually because no productive service is rendered by the recipients of these transfer payments in exchange. Recipients, you want to understand here is, say if I am talking about scholarship is a transfer payment. Who is the recipient? Students at different levels. Okay. Unemployment allowances. Who will be the recipient? Unemployed youth. Okay. Old age pension. The dependent ratio of our population, that is old people. We don't say old people, we say senior citizens. So on and so forth. Okay. So these recipients do not provide anything against it, that is, they do not render any productive service. So it is to be excluded. Number third precaution is expenditure on purchase of second hand goods. Wala. So you know, second hand goods, sale and purchase of second hand goods is not to be taken, while the brokerage and commission, etc., is to be taken on it. So dear students, here we are completed with the precaution part in its details. What remains is to understand the whole scenario once again in a jiffy, which I promised you people in a flowchart that I have made in advance for you people so that we may save some time. Components of GDP, I'll use an arrow, I won't use any pen and etc. this time now. So where is it? Okay, components of GDP in expenditure phase. We have been doing it. Components of GDP in income phase, components of GDP in production phase. Now we are doing it in expenditure phase. It is final consumption expenditure, final investment expenditure. The final consumption expenditure, which is also the C part of that equation, gets divided into private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure. And this final investment expenditure will be in three forms: gross final capital formation, change in stock, and net exports. This private final consumption expenditure is further getting divided into consumption expenditure and saving of non-profit institutions and savings of households. That savings ultimately gets invested, but here savings takes place. This gross final consumption capital formulation is, it could be residential capital formulation, it could be private final investment, fixed investment. Fixed investment means when you invest something in the fixed assets, like a factory, a machinery, or something like that, and public investment. So the below 5 parts, the consumption expansion, saving, non-profit invest by institutes, saving of households, and this residential, private final investment, and public investment. This is not very important and will be maybe asked some way, somehow, somewhere. But what is important here is, now I'll use a pen. Okay. You see, final consumption expenditure got divided into private final consumption expenditure and government final consumption expenditure. So I'll indicate it like it is the C part. Government final consumption expenditure is the G part. Final investment expenditure is the I part. And you also have here change in stock, delta S part. This is gross fixed capital formation. This is net exports, that means X minus M part. Now I think you must be able to correlate all these very things from your expression y is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. You see, your y is here on top, number 1. Your C is here, number 2. Your G is here, your I is here, number 3. This is your number 3. Your G is here, number 4. This is your number 4. Your what is remaining, X minus M, is here, number 5, and this is your number 5. That means we are done with the components of GDP in expenditure phase as well. So what remains is the numerical part, and let us do a few numericals in order to understand what we have been talking about. The final expenditure on GDP is private final consumption expenditure, your government final consumption expenditure, and gross fixed capital formation, your change in stock, your net exports. Bear these always things in your mind. And I have already converted into the formulas. Look at those formulas. Then let us begin with the questions, or let us begin with the numerical examples. That is what is going to help us.